Hi everybody, welcome back to First Friday Fives. I'm your host Sean here at Go Big Boar or Go Home. This is a much delayed and hopefully much anticipated episode of First Friday Fives, and it's the first of two parts. And the first part is the top 5 most overrated big bore handgun cartridges. So I just want to let everybody know right now, butthurt alarm. You might actually not be pretty happy with what ends up on this list. However, there's a few things to keep in mind. Number one, there's a reason that each of these cartridges is chosen, and we will get into why we chose these cartridges. Number two, please remember, you are welcome to disagree. This is not any kind of, definitive answer, and I am not the authority on this subject. So if you disagree with me, by all means, please say so in the comments. This is just, the opinion of the folks here at Go Big Boar or Go Home. That said, let's go ahead and jump right in. Number 5, and barely making the list of being overrated, is the 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, I'm going to start about the reasons why it barely made the list, because in fairness to this cartridge, it is one of the few that I can say was designed for a purpose, and it does that purpose perfectly. It's a self-defense round, it's a semi-automatic pistol round. The idea was to be a happy medium between 9mm and 45. 9mm, you got great capacity. 45, you got more stopping power. Well, with the 40 Smith & Wesson, you have more capacity than the 45 and more stopping power than the 9. There are some people who argue about whether the 40 or the 45 is a better stopper. I'm going to leave that for that's not the argument here. The point is, you got more rounds, you got more power. It did what it was supposed to do at a time in the early 90s when people were really trying to find something that would, give them more oomph than the standard 9mm of the day. Now, let's get into why it's overrated. It kind of not only is a happy medium between 9 and 45, but it's an unhappy medium in my book. See, because when you shoot the 45, people say, oh, it's got too much recoil. Oh, well then go to the 9mm. 9mm, much less recoil, but it's got that annoying, muzzle flip because it's a high pressure round. Well, the 40 is a high pressure round, and it has more kick than the 9mm and more muzzle flip than the 45. So it's like you take the, the extra capacity here, the extra power here, and you take the extra muzzle flip here and the extra recoil here, and you get it all together. So for me, that's always been one of those things that I'm just kind of like, just give me the 45. When I go to compact handguns, for whatever reason, I don't find the 40 Smith & Wesson a comfortable cartridge to shoot. Now, I'm not saying it's painful or it kicks a lot, it's just kind of uncomfortable. And I don't really have a good explanation for it because I don't have a problem with 10mm and similarly sized pistols, but the 40 just, I don't know, it just doesn't suit me. Another reason why I consider it kind of overrated, the whole point of its existence was that bullet technology, when it was designed, wasn't what it is today, and therefore, if you really wanted an effective round, it was tough to get a 9 to be as effective as a 45 or even close to it. So the 40 was going to be more effective. But with bullet technology today being what it is, the need for the 40 has kind of gone by the wayside. In fact, you'll see that there's a lot of agencies out there right now, a lot of cops, a lot of federal agencies, various law enforcement, that it's just disappeared entirely. Recently, when we had the military running new tests for a new pistol to replace the Beretta M9, they didn't look at a new 40, they stuck with the 9mm. So I have to say, the 40 Smith, it's a great cartridge, it does what it says it's going to do, but it's outlived kind of the potential it had and the purpose. And a move that'll probably surprise everybody because this is one of my favorite cartridges of all time. The 44 Magnum comes in at number 4. Now, the reason I put this here isn't because it's a bad cartridge. Far from it. This is one of the most versatile cartridges out there. It's also one of the most, mentioned when we talk about big bores or handgun hunting. And realistically speaking, you can take just about everything on the planet with very careful load choice. I'm not going to suggest you should go after the big 5 in Africa, but people have. And people have taken down very large game, even rhinoceroses and elephants with a 44 and a well-placed shot. That said, here's why it's overrated. Number one, when people come up to me in the range and they see me shooting one of my big bore revolvers, the first thing that goes, oh, is that a 44? No, it's not. But that's the thing. Every big gun is a 44 Magnum. It's kind of gotten that overexposure where it's almost cliche. Big gun, 44. Hey, you're shooting a revolver, it's really loud, is that a 44? One of the other things about it that to me is a little bit why it's overrated is it isn't the king of power anymore. You know, it has not held the title of most powerful handgun in the world since 1983. Another reason for it being overrated and dead serious, you know, even though you can take these big games, man, you gotta load careful and you gotta have a gun that can handle those loads. There are certain loads that, you know, the pressures and the heavier bullets, they may not fit in the cylinder of some firearms. Other firearms may not just have the toughness to withstand the higher pressures if you do a plus P round. So you know, it's really hard to get it to do some of these things. There are a lot of cartridges out there that are bigger that maybe aren't that much worse in the recoil territory, like say a strongly loaded 45 Colt plus P, or maybe even a 480 Ruger, that might do the job better. I love this cartridge, pains me to put it on the list, but unfortunately, like I said, overexposed. It's not the wonder kid everybody seems to think it is, and frankly, you know, there are other choices that might be better for your purposes. Moving on to number 3, and I don't know if this will surprise anyone, is none other than the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. Now, I'm going to say some controversial stuff on this one. While I do like this round, it is powerful and it's very useful, it's kind of too powerful. It's a cartridge that was designed really for the purpose of regaining that title of the most powerful handgun in the world. Smith & Wesson sells the most powerful handgun in the world. We designed the most powerful handgun cartridge in the world. Yeah, that's pretty much what it's for. I mean, the cartridge originally, if you look at the specs, was designed to outpower the 500 Maximum, which most people would agree is the limit of handgun power in a usable package, meaning something you can actually carry on your hip. Because if you've ever seen an X-frame or the BFRs that are in 500 Smith & Wesson, you're going to need a cross-chest holster or a shoulder holster or have swivel studs put on it for a sling, because those things, I mean, you might as well be carrying a rifle. They're so darn big. It's got that limited utility because of how much recoil and how much, you know, power it has. Second reason, it's actually overpowered for what you need. When you start looking at the muzzle energies that the 500 Max delivers, this gun, I mean, this cartridge can deliver significantly more power, but for what purpose? And the truth is, bragging rights. You know, they're not going to get outdone anytime soon. It's a good caliber, and if you're willing to load it the right way, you can do a lot with this. It's very accurate. It can be good for silhouette, especially long distance silhouette. And it's honestly an excellent stopper for big game. It's just, you know, there's not a whole lot it does that my 500 JRH can't do. Number 2 comes in as the 45 ACP. My favorite round at the target range, you know, for all purposes and fun, and for self-defense even, this is really my preferred round. It's overrated. So how can the guy who loves this cartridge so much say it's overrated? Well, there's a couple good reasons. Number 1, this is a cartridge that was designed when semi-automatic cartridges were in their infancy. And to the credit of the designers, it's done so well that it's still a relevant cartridge today. And it is relevant. There's some people who say out there, oh, you know, it's gone, get rid of it. No, it's a relevant cartridge. It's an excellent stopper. And people still use it in, you know, competition because it's a good cartridge. That said, there are better cartridges out there today. You know, I mentioned the 40 Smith & Wesson earlier. You can get, you know, comparable power with more rounds held. So that's a plus. You know, the 9mm with modern bullet technology now is a very effective stopper. The 45, you know, it was great when we had crappy bullet technology and you needed something big. A big, heavy 230 grain piece of lead that would make a big hole in your target. You know, for self-defense, that's great, you know, but nowadays it's not as needed. Like the 40 Smith & Wesson, it's kind of outlived its great need and its great purpose. A couple other things, it's such a low pressure round that, I mean, like, being dirty is like, it's like duh, you know, they should just call it the 45 dirty cartridge. I can go to the range with my 9mm and I will shoot them 50 rounds and they still look fairly clean. You go shoot 25 rounds out of a 45 and the whole front end, the muzzle is just covered in soot. So, and you know, and I gotta be honest, I think people overhype how good this cartridge is. It is good. It is effective. But there are people who are still saying, if it's not a 45, it's not worth it. That's nonsense. You have a good, if you pick a reasonable caliber, 9mm, 357, 10mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, any of these cartridges, even 380 and 38 Special Plus P, and even 38 Special. If you get a good solid loading with a good projectile, that's, modern projectile, something like, say, gold dots, or maybe some of the new DPX bullets that Corbon has, where it's just copper leaflets that stay together better, you don't need a 45. It's one of those things where when you didn't have the bullet technology, yeah, but you don't need a 45. I hate to admit it, I love this cartridge, but people need to just accept the fact. It's a good cartridge, it's not the best cartridge, and it's not going to put all other cartridges in its shadow. And coming in at number 1, drum roll please, the 50 Action Express. Dear Lord, the people at Magnum Research Incorporated are really gonna hate me. But if you were to pick a cartridge, rifle, shotgun, handgun, doesn't matter, and say this is a cartridge that has no purpose, this is that cartridge. The 50 Action Express was designed to be the overall cartridge length of a .44 Magnum with the rim of a .44 Magnum, so they didn't have to change the bullets on the Desert Eagle. The idea when it was made was to make a more powerful, big cartridge for the Desert Eagle platform. And I want to be fair. Again, with their design parameters in place, success. Let's talk about the utility of this cartridge. It's way too powerful to ever use for self-defense. The recoil, the muzzle blast, not to mention the fact that I don't care how good the bullet expands, it's probably going to go right through a person. It's no good for that. So maybe it's good for hunting. No. Since they designed it at that overall length of the .44 Magnum, you're limited with the cartridge designed the way it is. The cross-sectional density of the bullet, which is very important when you're hunting, is terrible. You can hunt deer. I've heard some people say they've hunted antelope. I've heard of people hunting pigs with it, and I'm sure, again, with a good bullet, you probably could. But if you were willing to step up to the 500 JRH, or the 500 Line Ball, or the 500 Wyoming Express, all of those have comparable powder capacity to give you, comparable velocities, and they're much easier to use bullets that have good cross-sectional densities for you to load with. So you can hunt much bigger game with this. You can take anything with those cartridges, whereas the 50 Action Express ends up getting kind of limited. It doesn't even have a proper crimp groove because it's usually used in a semi-auto. So I'm being fair, it's not a good handgun hunting choice. It's a terrible self-defense choice. What's the purpose of this? And the answer really is just novelty. Why do we have a 50 caliber semi-automatic Magnum powered handgun? Because why not? Now I'm going to be the first to actually defend that. Why not? It's fun. But as a cartridge, every time I hear somebody say, oh, that's such a great cartridge, the 50 Desert Eagles, oh, so no, it's a terribly designed cartridge for purposes of self-defense or hunting. It was designed to fit a specific package for novelty purposes. That's it. And for that reason, it goes down as hands down the number 1 most overrated handgun cartridge of all time. Okay, so let's run this back real quick for everybody. Coming in at number 5, we've got the 40 Smith & Wesson, because unfortunately, as good as it is, it has outlived its original design purpose. Number 4, the .44 Magnum, because it's not the baddest kid on the block anymore. Number 3, the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum, because it's so powerful and it doesn't need to be. Number 2, the 45 ACP, because the guy who says if you don't have a 45, then it's not going to stop him is wrong. And number 1, because it has no purpose for existing other than to exist, the 50 Action Express. Well guys, I hope you like that. I hope nobody's too butthurt. But if you do have a difference of opinion, and you do think I got the list wrong, please, that's what we got the comments section for. I would love to hear it. I would ask, let's try and be respectful of one another, because at the end of the day, guys, it's just opinion. Like I said, we're not an authority here. But thanks for joining us. And coming up in number 2 is the 5 most underrated big bore handgun cartridges. So we'll see you soon, and remember, go big bore or go home.